Hi, it's Jennifer, and thanks for stopping by. I have somebody here who wants to say hi to you. She just got up from her nap, so she wants to say hi. Can you say hi?
Hi.
What's your name?
Ah.
Lila. Do you like to stamp?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you say bye-bye?
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's get to work. I'm going to show you how to create this card that has lots of layering and lots of texture. I'll be using a technique with white ink and stencils along with how to create your own glitter paper without it rubbing off. So let's go ahead and start with the background. I have a piece of 11 inch by 4 1/4 inch Audrey blue cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, and I've scored it down the middle, but I'm going to keep it open while I do this step of the card. I'm taking some painter's tape and I am masking off the area above the score line so that I can make sure that my stenciling stays on just the front of the card. Okay, so I have the extra large dot stencil from Simon Says Stamp. This is a fantastic stencil because those dots are so large you could even stamp inside of them if you wanted to. I'm using painter's tape to hold the stencil down. I like to put a piece of tape at the top and at the bottom of the stencil so I could easily lift one side to look underneath to make sure I like the results. Now once I have this tape down, I wanted to apply white ink over the stencil. This is my favorite white ink. It's Unicorn White Ink from Hero Arts. It's a fantastic white pigment ink. I'm using the mini ink blending tool from Tim Holtz. Normally this is used with distress ink, but I think it works well with many inks. Here I am heavily applying this pigment ink over the stencil. Now this is a messy ink. It's a very kind of gloppy pigment ink, but that's what makes the white show up on cardstock, on darker colored cardstock. So it's definitely the best white ink there is. So I am just going to heavily apply this ink over my entire stencil. I'm kind of pouncing and kind of turning it as I go to make sure that I get ink into all the crevices. Now this is going to stay wet for some time. If you set this aside to dry, it would take quite a while. So what I do is I zap it with my heat gun, and this will speed up the process. So I'm going to carefully remove the stencil, and I'll wipe that stencil clean with a baby wipe in a moment. But check out that white ink over the stencil. I just think that is gorgeous. It looks like a pattern paper. Now I'm going to go ahead and zap this with a heat gun to hurry up the drying process. It does take a little bit of time with the heat gun, but I'm actually not going to dry it entirely. I'm going to do something extra special with this. So while it's still a little bit wet, I'm going to go in with a little bit of sparkle embossing powder. I just want a touch of glitter in this background, a touch of sparkle. If you really wanted an intense amount of sparkle, you could just, before heat setting this at all, dump a bunch of this embossing powder onto it, and then you would have a white sparkly dot all over the paper. But I just wanted a touch of glitter, so I'm just using my fingers to sprinkle on, just like fairy dust, just a tiny amount of the Judikins Iridescent Sparkle Embossing Powder, and I'm heat setting it now. So as I heat set, I'm drying the rest of the white ink and I'm heat setting that embossing powder. What I end up with is a bunch of white dots with a little bit of sparkle in it. This is a great way, if you don't like a ton of sparkle but just a little bit, this is a great technique. Just sprinkle a little bit of the glitter embossing powder down, but not much. And because I use so little of the embossing powder, I maintain the matte finish to my white dots, but still have a little bit of sparkle here and there. Okay, let's go ahead and create this embellishment, all these layered pieces for the sunshine embellishment. I'm using some new dies. All of this is part of the new Simon Says Stamp Pure Sunshine release. I have the Sunshine Word die. I have the Mini Hearts die. This is an older one, but I use it all the time. And the Sunshine die. I've picked some cardstocks colors that I think I want to use, but you'll see I end up changing things as I go along. I change things a lot. So I'm going to run this through my die cut machine. It's easy just to do all three of these at once, just to save some time. And I am using my magnetic plate here, so I don't have to worry about these dies shifting as I run it through. So look how detailed that sunshine die cut is. I just absolutely love that. Now I decided I wanted to turn this orange cardstock into glitter paper. I'm really loving glitter paper, but I'm finding I'm going through it very fast. And I only like glitter paper that has glitter that stays put. I don't want it rubbing off. So here's one trick you can do. I've covered my die cut with Versamark ink so it's nice and sticky. I've temporarily adhered it to a piece of scrap paper, and I'm putting on that same sparkle embossing powder. The reason I put this onto that piece of scrap paper is that's just like a holding place for me, so I can hold it as I'm embossing it. If I use tweezers, I might mess up the sparkly embossing powder. So now I'm just going to zap this with my heat gun, and look at, I have my own colored glitter paper that's not too glittery. It's just got some shine and it doesn't rub off. Now, I did change my mind on this. The sunshine I cut from gray cardstock, but I decided I wanted it to be black. Instead of going and cutting another one of these, I'm just coloring it with my black marker. I'm not sure which would have been faster, but this is what I decided to do. So I change colors of my die cuts all the time by just coloring them with whatever markers you may have. Okay, so I also punched a yellow circle from a 1 3/8 inch circle punch. So I have that ready to layer up. There's a sentiment on this stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. I love this set. The sentiment says, is coming, hang in there. So you put sunshine is coming, hang in there. But I wanted it to be 2 layers of text. So I cut my stamp apart, which I know a lot of people don't like to do, but I promise it doesn't hurt the stamps. What you could do is creative masking, just ink up part of the sentiment and stamp it, and then ink up the other part of the sentiment and stamp it. But I find cutting is so much quicker, and you can always mount them as you originally were intended. So now I've stamped these towards the bottom of that yellow circle, and I was looking at this and I decided that orange sunshine that I originally showed you that I did was a little bit too dark. So I went ahead and made a lighter orange, and I think that's better because the paper darkens when you put the embossing powder on it. So I just kind of changed gears on there, but I covered this orange sunshine the same way I did the other one before. Okay, so now I wanted to add some shine to that word sunshine. It seemed to get lost when it was just plain cardstock. So here's a way to make your little die cuts like this really stand out. I temporarily am adhering it to some scrap paper, and I'm going to press Versamark ink over the whole piece. Then I've got some clear embossing powder here. Here are its clear embossing powder. I'm going to shake that on, and you'll see you get embossing powder all over your scrap paper, but that's okay. I'm going to zap this with my heat gun, and this gives the die cut a nice shine. However, I want it to kind of have a little raised look to it, so I'm going to do it again. Once it's cool, I put some more Versamark ink on top of it and put another coat of clear embossing powder. Those 2 layers of clear embossing powder will kind of raise up on this detailed die cut, kind of giving a little bit of dimension, a nice rounded shine to it that really makes it stand out. So now my word will stand out against the background with all that glitter. So check out that. I think that's just a great way to take a simple die cut and giving it a little oomph. Now adding this delicate die cut is easy. I just squirt some multi-medium onto my craft sheet here and put some on the back with my fingers. You can use any liquid adhesive, but this one holds super well. Now you'll notice my word is hanging off the edges. I'll deal with that later on, so don't worry about that right now. Now I did decide, instead of going and finding that little dot for the eye and sunshine, just to use a black gem there. I just thought that was quicker and easier, and it gives a nice little bit of dimension also. I just love taking lots of die cuts and layering them up to create your own embellishment. Okay, now if you look in the background of the card, you see lots of little hearts that kind of look like they're floating back there. I decided to use another layer of stencils on this background. I have this stencil with all these little hearts. This is part of a Simon Says Stamp stencil collection. There's actually 4 stencils together in one pack. That stripe one that you just saw is one that's in there. But I love these little hearts, and what I'm going to do is hold it over my background and ink over it with Peacock Feathers Distress Ink. Any kind of ink would work on here. I really like these distress inks because they dry nice and blended. And I'm just putting random area. I want to concentrate my hearts around where that sunshine will be, but I want my hearts to go kind of lower on the card. And since this is a small stencil, I'm just shifting the position of the stencil and adding some more ink. And you'll see each time I'm kind of lining up the heart pattern with the heart pattern that was there originally, but you could go random if you wanted to. And I'll just keep shifting this around to apply like this little cloud of hearts behind the sunshine. Now I did want like a few single hearts kind of floating off on their own. So what I'm doing is masking off just one little single heart on the bottom of the stencil there, on the bottom left. And that way I can do one heart at a time. You could also stamp these hearts over the background, but I think by inking them you get like a softness and you can kind of fade out into the area where there aren't hearts. But you could definitely stamp here if you would prefer. This little heart stencil and that diagonal stripe one I just showed you a moment ago, they're sold together, and I think they're great for layering some inking on the back of cards like I'm doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and add my sunshine embellishment. And after I've done this, I'm going to go ahead and remove my painter's tape from the top. When I pull off the painter's tape, I kind of pull it off at an angle. You can see I'm pulling it off kind of at an angle, and that seems to help prevent it from tearing your paper. Now to fold my crease really good on my score line here, I'm just going to go ahead and use my bone folder, and you get a nice flat score line. Okay, so I thought this needed a little oomph. I was just going to put plain kind of coral colored hearts on it, but I thought it needed a little more of that glitter. I don't know why. So I'm making more of my own glitter paper. I have added Versamark ink over it and putting on that same sparkle embossing powder. This sparkle doesn't rub off, so it's fantastic to get that glitter look without the mess. I'm going to go ahead and heat set it. So now I have my own glitter paper. You could do a whole sheet of this if you wanted to and save some. But what I'm going to do is just run this through my die cut machine with these little hearts. This is a great die from Simon Says Stamp. And I've cut a bunch of the little hearts. So you can even emboss your glitter paper before you die cut it. I've arranged my hearts where I want them, and I've smeared a little bit of the multi-medium on my craft sheet. Got my tweezers, and I'm just going to kind of dip each heart into the adhesive and then place it on my card. You could put just a squirt of this on the back of the heart and place it in place. But I find this is very quick and easy to do. Just kind of dip your little heart into it or your little embellishment into it and put it down. This adhesive will hold anything, even metal, so you can go to town with this stuff. Now here's where I admit that I have some issues. I saw this and I kind of felt like some of those hearts needed a little oomph. They needed some dimension behind them. So I'm risking it and peeling off those hearts, and I'm going to put 2 or 3 of them down with some clear foam tape. You can see that there's a little mess left behind on my card where that heart was, but I'm going to put the heart right back in place. So I'm just peeling them up before that adhesive was completely dry, and I'm going to put a few of the hearts down with the dimensional clear foam tape. I'm using the clear so you can't see the white from the side since these are such tiny die cuts. So there you see I have 3 hearts raised up, and for some reason I just thought that dimension would help them pop. I actually had a few extra hearts, so I glued them on the inside, positioned about the same place that my sunshine is on the outside, and it just kind of pulls it all together. Now the word sunshine hangs off that die cut, kind of floats there, which I think is cool, but if you do want to kind of tack that down so it doesn't get caught on anything, I just put a little bit of the adhesive on my fingertip and put in a few places on the back of that die cut. And then I'm just going to go ahead and take 2 heavy things that are within reach to put on these to hold them to the card. So I put a punch on one side, and I'm going to put my phone on the other side. So anything just to hold it there for just a few minutes so that it dries. And so there we have it, a white inked stenciled card with lots of texture and lots of layer and some do-it-yourself glitter paper. Now I link all of my products to multiple sources in my YouTube description below. You can check them out there, or you can go over to my blog at jennifermcguireinc.com, where I have a lot of other information and links to additional examples like this. Thanks so much for stopping by.